Too quick.
Okay, there we are. We were muted. There we are.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's podcast. We're going to start this week with going over the secret police in the USSR. We're going to pretty much start from the beginning of the 20th century, and we'll try to go to the middle towards the end. We have a lot to discuss this week. And yeah, as you can see, we have listened to your suggestions, and we implemented a nice little box down there for comments on, which can be shown from each platform that we're streaming on: Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. I hope you are all doing well. See, there's quite a few people coming in.
The Facebook comments might still not be showing where this is the first time we use this feature, so if
Still getting there.
yeah, so if anyone comments on Facebook and you don't see your comment on the screen, Andrei is going to be monitoring the Facebook comments, so we should be getting to you, hopefully.
I just want one more thing before we start. I know that this is why we're streaming in many platforms, so I know different people like to use different platforms, but we do recommend to use Twitch because you will see it in the best quality, and I think it has the smallest delay as a stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'll pass on to Calin, which he's going to start us off with this week's topic.
So we're going to start off with, obviously, secret police in the USSR. I'm going to change the current topic to secret police. Secret police during the Civil War. Because, okay, it's going a bit off the screen. I'm going to have to format it right now. But the secret police was used a lot during the beginning stages of communism in Russia, more specifically when looking at the Civil War. After Lenin, Stalin, and the Bolsheviks took over the leadership of the USSR, they instated something called the Cheka, which was a secret police that was meant to focus on anti-communist traitors, people who were trying to intervene with the regime, and other such people that were deemed a danger to the already fragile state. So from 1917, from its creation, to 1922, which is the end of the conflict, the early conflict of the USSR, the Cheka went around the Soviet-controlled territories and apprehended those who were seen as white sympathizers. The whites were the oppositional force of the Bolsheviks, who were supported by foreign powers such as England and America and other powers which didn't want to see communism rise in Russia, and as such the leadership saw these people as a threat and eliminated them through the use of the secret police. After the end of the Civil War, the leadership specifically Lenin, saw that he needed to focus inwards at the people who were a part of the Bolshevik party and part of the structure that made up the USSR. So in 1922, he created the OGPU, which is the All-Union State Political Administration, which is kind of a cover name for this branch of the government, which dealt with managing, basically looking out for people in the party who were there for the wrong purposes, which means they were there to not to further communism. They were just there to take advantage of the new government and the new power that was given to them because of this new position. And these people who were either trying to take down the party from within or they didn't have the goal to further communism, were picked up by the OGPU and then sent to one of the famous gulags. That was the gulag system was started under Lenin, and it continued throughout the history of the USSR until 1954, when Khrushchev dismantled them. But we will get onto that later. So the OGPU went on even after Lenin's death in 1924, and was then controlled by Stalin after his rise to power in the party until 1934, when some events critical to the party's structure set off a big chain of events that meant that the secret police had to be restructured to be more leadership-centric. So the power was, before with the OGPU, the power of the secret police was held in the people who led the secret police. But because Stalin wanted to centralize the power of the party around him and few supporters that he had, he reformed the party into a different organization known as the NKVD, which started out in 1934 from the murder of Kirov. So the murder of Kirov is what can be deemed as the start of the Great Purge, which is I'm going to change the topic to the Great Purge now, because this is going to be.
I think before you change the topic, we can still go on a bit on what you were talking about, especially the OGPU, because the OGPU can be seen as more of a integration, or better yet said, a transition that was assured from Lenin's leadership to Stalin's leadership. Because Lenin, even though people see him as a communist, he was more of a socialist, and the socialism is pretty much you can see as the base of communism. But socialism was seen more as someone knocking on your door and representing, hey, this is what we offer you, this is how we can help you, as long as you join us and as long as you agree with our regime, as long as you agree with our theory. Communism was more like they bang down your door, they take half of your stuff inside your house, and they say, you're going to be happy about this, and you're not going to comment, and you're not going to say anything, otherwise we're going to kill you. So it was a really tough transition. I think the OGPU assured that there weren't certain people who didn't like communism or who didn't like socialism, the idea itself, and they wanted to create a revolution so they can stop it.
Yeah, the OGPU, as I said, didn't focus as much on the citizens, but surely on the people in the party. They placed a big focus on loyalty towards the cause that they were trying to build, and as such, they built up this this ideology within the party by cropping out the parts that weren't as staunchly towards the ideology. So those who didn't support the ideology with all of their heart were taken away. Anything else to add on the secret police OGPU?
Wait, give me a sec. I think something.
Well, we have someone on YouTube, Caritas Kemo. Hello.
Yeah, no, I thought the stream might not be working anymore, but it is.
Stalin's period of SSCB has a lot of issues to be discussed. True. KGB is one of them. We will. KGB was installed after Stalin's death in 1954, but we will move on to the KGB after talking about the Great Purge.
We're trying to go on the timeline base, so we don't confuse people jumping from one timeline to another. So yeah, I think it's time we can start talking about the Great Purge, or at least the start of the Great Purge. So just like Calin mentioned before, it was Kirov's death that actually started. It was said that to be the start of the Great Purge because officially the Great Purge did start in 1936, but there was a certain build-up caused by Stalin by killing a lot of people that were, if they weren't to be dead, they would start a revolution against communism, and probably the Great Purge wouldn't have taken place. So even though there was no hard proof that Kirov's death was caused by Stalin, or that Kirov's death was orchestrated at least by Stalin in accordance with the NKVD, many historians do say that Stalin was the man who actually orchestrated Kirov's death. And the importance that Kirov had is he had a lot of influence on the people that didn't really support communism, but they were neither against it. They were like sort of in between. They didn't know what to do. And he was the sort of guy, he was the sort of activist that was going against communism and trying to, tell people that, hey, look, this is what you're getting yourself into, so you shouldn't. After Kirov's death, what happened was that a guy named Andrei Vishnitsky accused the opposition that Stalin did actually orchestrate Kirov's death for certain reasons. And I think there was a trial in... when was the trial for this?
Are we talking about the trial of the leadership, or are we talking about the trial of the man who killed Kirov?
The trial that the man that killed Kirov.
So, from what I know, this is straight from what I've been taught. So, there is no the man who arrested the man who killed Kirov was arrested as soon as the events happened and trialed.
Yeah, because it happened in broad daylight in Leningrad.
Yeah, and there's a lot of theories behind why this happened, and there's because this was someone part of the party. This wasn't someone let's say in the army. There's a lot of questions behind why he had access to a pistol, because this man murdered Kirov with a pistol. Why he could get so close to Kirov, because Kirov had bodyguards as well. So obviously many theories play into the question of if Stalin did end up doing this, but because Kirov was a quite high up party member, obviously an investigation was started by Stalin into why this happened. And one of the big things to come out of the investigation was that Stalin deemed that some of the people in the party were actually going against the what he deemed to be the good of the country. And this started a series of show trials of many of the people who gained power in the party under Lenin, and who Stalin deemed to be a threat to his power, as they had that legitimacy of being part of Lenin's government. So
I think. Go on and finish.
I was going to move on to the trial of 16, 17, and 21. If you want to add something before that.
It is important you mentioned before that Kirov was also a member of the United Opposition, which was a political group that was formed in 1926 specifically to go against Stalin and his communistic regime.
Yeah. I'm just adjusting some of the things on stream.
Just like mentioned before, this group was made by mainly people that didn't see communism in the best of light, or literally saw the truth behind communism, or at least Stalin's communism, because like I mentioned before, communism has very different factors based on the culture that it comes from, but that's for another podcast. It's a big topic.
We have a comment on YouTube. So 55 million people are dead because of World War II. I mean, KGB was responsible for some of the deaths or lost people. The secret police did play a quite large part in the deportation of people to the gulags, but we will get into that in a minute. I want to talk about the leadership first, because the main thing to come out of the murder of Kirov was the arrest of two very high-profile communist leaders. These were Zinoviev and Kamenev, and these two were part of the Soviet cabinet, the people who make the ultimate decision for the country. They were part of the leadership since the start of the revolution. They were there since the October 1917, when the Bolsheviks took power. And like I said before, Stalin saw this, and he saw the legitimacy behind these people, and he decided that if he wanted to have a safe reign of the USSR, he had to eliminate them. So he basically took the murder of Kirov and blamed it on Zinoviev and Kamenev firstly, and he took them, arrested them, and in August 1936 he set up the trial of the 16, at which he took Zinoviev and Kamenev before a series of judges, which were obviously appointed directly by Stalin. So they were obviously going to be very not impartial. They were going to be very biased towards Stalin. And before the trial, they were tortured. Zinoviev and Kamenev were tortured and forced to make to say that they were they committed crimes and plotted to destabilize the country for the purpose of them gaining power, something that they obviously couldn't have done. But the only people who knew that they couldn't have done this were the people in the leadership who didn't want to challenge Stalin, as they saw what happened to the people who had the potential to challenge Stalin, and the Stalin himself, who was obviously involved in the trial. So
I think just before you continue, one good thing to mention is, like you said, these two men, Zinoviev and Kamenev, they were part of the cabinet, and this meant that at the time, at the beginning, I think it was 1920, around when they were still in power, Stalin was with them as well, and they were friends with Stalin. They were Stalin's allies, because most of the people that Stalin did end up killing were the people that actually, helped him raise his position and end up where he was.
Yeah. I'm trying to resize the chat box so we can see all of the comments from YouTube properly, because right now they're a bit cut off. But after the trial of the 16, Stalin saw this opportunity to take out all of his opponents in the cabinet and replace them with yes men, which means that he would just replace them with people who would never disagree with him, meaning that he would basically rule the country as a king. So in 1937, he continued the purge of the party by arresting Karl Radek and Georgy Pyatakov, another two very high-profile members of the Communist Party, and they were accused of forming a Trotskyist rightist bloc, which, because of, at the time, Trotsky was sent out of the Soviet Union. This was during Stalin's rise to power. If any association with Trotsky was seen as detrimental to your position, and Stalin used this to his advantage and blamed them for following the Trotskyist ideals due to them being present during Trotsky's time in the Communist Party. And as usual, the KGB forced them to make confessions that were just impossible for them to have done, and again, it ended up with them being expelled from the party, and this was another two of his opponents gone. These were more economical opponents rather than political, because these two were more economic theorists. But again, any opposition to Stalin was bad for Stalin, because his position still in 1937 was still precarious, as he still had many of the original people of the party present with him. So this was the second trial, and we come to the final trial, the trial of the 21 in 1938, where he decided to purge all of the rightists out of the party. I use air quotes because rightists in the Communist Party are more, they're not what we commonly think of as rightists. They are more either socialists or central, like socialist democrats. They are still on the left of the political spectrum, but they are not to the extreme that Stalin wanted them to be. So as such, we had Tomsky, who was another big high-profile member of the Communist Party. He was arrested but committed suicide before the trial. So he was obviously removed through that mean. And then we have Bukharin and Rykov, who again were accused of forming a Trotskyist right bloc, and trialed after they were forced under duress from the NKVD to make confessions that they were indeed in contact with Trotsky, which was impossible because they just couldn't have, logistically speaking, these two members of the Communist Party, although they did hold a lot of power within the USSR, could not have made contact with Trotsky without him being, without anyone in the party being aware of this. So
it's not just about having a lot of power, but if you look at Bukharin especially, he was one of the authors that actually created the revolutionary theory, which actually helped, many historians say, helped dethrone communism in the end. It was something that was going against, it was something that was trying to show that neither communism or socialism is a good thing, but not looking from a democratic, neither from a capitalist perspective. So this is why these men were so powerful, because it is imperative to mention that we're talking about the start of the 20th century, where the Soviet Union suffered from the lack of education. So people were very easily attracted or influenced by men who actually had a lot of education, men who knew a lot of things. And just because you seem smart, everyone would think, oh, he knows what he's talking about, I should follow him. And it was just pretty much a game of who has more influence on the civilians, on the citizens.
And during Stalin's time, he cultivated such a big cult of personality within the people of the USSR that any decision that he made just seemed as the right decision to everyone in the country. Even after his death, millions of people flocked to Moscow, and many died in the stampede that came as a result of his body being presented in the mausoleum, which really represents the fanatical way that people worshipped him. Above the doors of every classroom, before before Stalin's denunciation by who came after him? My mind's going blank. In 1956. It's with a K. My mind's gone blank. Let me see if I can get his name real quick. But Khrushchev. Yeah,
Yes.
Khrushchev. So after Khrushchev's denunciation of Stalin's action in 1956, this obviously changed. But before this, above every classroom in the USSR, there was a slogan which was something along the lines of "Thank you, Father Stalin, for allowing us to be educated," which shows how deeply ingrained this this cult of personality was, where children from the start of them learning how to read and write, the first things that they saw before entering a classroom was "Thank you, Stalin," and this was just ingrained into their head.
This is pretty much the educational system that was used in the whole of Soviet Union and all of the communist countries that were alienated by the Soviet Union, just to show you how they just needed to indoctrinate children from a very young age so they will never actually go against communism. And on that same note, I'm not trying to get too political here, but on the same note, this is it is interesting to see even after the victory of World War II. Most of the photos you would see would be of people not necessarily praising Stalin, but holding up pictures of Lenin, representing that even though, as I said, socialism is the base of communism, he showed socialism in a friendlier way, a more not so pushy way, not so violent, not so "you will die if you don't do this," or you are obligated to live in a certain way. So that, I think, even it was just Stalin that he would always push people around and he would always call the shots, get the people killed, whoever stood in his way. But Lenin always pushed himself with the influence rather than just doing dirty work behind the scenes.
Yeah. So continuing on with the Great Purge, after the trial of the 21, well, that's where the high profile parts of the Great Purge end. Through those 3 trials, Stalin managed to eliminate all of his political opponents, which meant that he was unchallenged in terms of leadership. Most of the people that replaced the people that he purged were people that he knew that were fanatical followers of him and his ideology, which meant that anything that he thought of would have just been put through, because you needed a majority in the cabinet to make a decision. And this was a problem, especially in the early 1930s, where Stalin wanted to move on with his 5-year plan, economical ideology, and many of the more right-leaning members of the cabinet didn't want to go along with this because they saw that there were other opportunities, like the Lenin system of the new economic policy, which started in 1921 to 1928 when the 5-year plan started, which was a more liberal kind of socialist economy. But Stalin he saw this as a deviation from true communism, and as such, removing these people meant that Stalin could continue to promote what he saw as true communism and building it in his country. As part of the Great Purge, we also have the Purge of the Red Army from 1937, from 1938, where it says 3 of the 5 marshals of the Soviet Union were killed or sent to gulags, which was very bad, as only 3-4 years later they would be invaded by Germany, which this was one of the big reasons why the Red Army did so bad during the beginning stages of the Second World War, because they destroyed all of the experienced leaders that they had. These marshals, these 3 marshals that were killed, had experience from the Civil War. These were people who fought along with Lenin and Trotsky, which Stalin obviously saw as a danger to his leadership, especially after dispatching of all of these old remnants of the system. And he also purged 14 out of the 16 army commanders, once again destroying any skill left in the army, and he killed all of the naval officers, which led to a lot of military blunders during World War II in terms of the navy of the Soviet Union, which, although it didn't make that much of an impact during the war, because obviously Germany had naval supremacy over the small coastline that the USSR did have in Europe, it was still an impact of the purge. And obviously, if he wanted to tie all of the ends loose, he had to also purge the secret police that helped him perform all of these tasks. So in 1936, he killed Yagoda, which was the leader of the wait, I think I'm saying it right. Yeah, so in 1936, Yagoda was killed and replaced with Yezov, who
Eventually was killed as well.
yeah, Yezov, after killing 3,000 NKVD officers, then was replaced by someone else in 1938, and then killed as a scapegoat for Stalin.
Look, I'm gonna send you a picture that you can show maybe. And I think it is time to go a bit into more of the side killing, especially how the NKVD worked. So the NKVD, just like Calin mentioned, there were people that would say yes, there were people that wouldn't go against Stalin's word. So, if Stalin gave a word, the next day it would be done, or the next hour even. The first director of NKVD to be put in charge was Genkrik Griyovich Yagonda. He was pretty much, he took care of all the killings that happened between 1934 and 1936, and pretty much at the end of his status, again, Stalin was scared because he became a man with the law of power, a man with the law of influence, and people were scared of him. So that meant that he could get people against Stalin, even though if he didn't have no reason at the time, Stalin wouldn't take any sort of risks.
Do you want to explain the photo that you sent to me if I pull it up?
Right. So, yeah, tell me when you pull it up. So
yeah, it's up now.
It's up. Okay. So in the photo that we have, the main two important people that are near river is Joseph Stalin himself and Nikolai Yeznov. And the very funny thing about this photo is after his death, there was another article published in the Soviet newspaper, I think it was in 1938, where he was slowly but surely removed from the picture. There is also a picture, if you can look up for it, where he was actually removed from the same picture.
I'll try to find it. Keep talking about it. Stalin did this to more than just one picture.
Oh yeah, it was many pictures. Like, it's not just killing them, it was trying to remove them from history. It was trying to show that these men didn't exist. Just to show, so people wouldn't actually, blame Stalin that he might have orchestrated their death or whatever. So after 1936, at the end actually of 1936, like I said, Stalin didn't take any risks, so he had to remove Yagoda and replace him with another director, which
before you move on to that, I just pulled up a picture of the post-processed photo that we just saw before.
This same picture was published in a newspaper, the Soviet newspaper, in 1938. So you can see that how he was just simply removed, and no one spoke about him. He never existed. Although the original picture, as you can see, shows him being next to Stalin.
Yeah. So,
but if you show the first picture again, I just want to point out one small detail.
2 seconds. I'll pull it up now. Should be up now.
Because we can see in the first picture, you can see that if you look closely, real close, you can see that Yeznov is actually kind of put there, because this isn't the original picture. This was a picture that was created later on in communist times to show that he was originally there. But if you look at the second picture again, you can see it's more clearer, as of Yeznov in the first picture shown. He has a sort of borderlines, a kind of like light shadow around him, showing that he was placed there, not from the actual original picture. Yeah, just like you can see. Right. So now we can continue with. So like I said, from 1936, it was time for Yagoda to go. And the new director from 1936 to 1938 of the NKVD would have been Nikolai Yanovich Yezhov.
Yep.
So now it was Yezhov's turn to take care of the killings. So just like I mentioned before, all the killings between 1936 and 1939, the first killing being Yagoda, he would take care of them, obviously him and a lot of other people from the NKVD, a lot of other, I think there was another three officers that commanded the NKVD.
Yeah.
So,
can I get a note about
yes.
Yezhov? He received the nickname of the Bloody Dwarf as he took pleasure in actually committing a lot of the killings of these traitors. he would often, when he met with Stalin, he would often come in to the office with blood on his hands, which even for a man of Stalin's like level, it even scared him, which was partly one of the reasons why he was removed in the end, because Stalin kind of saw him as somebody that had the potential to remove him. You'd go on.
So just like I mentioned before, there was it was Yasnov, and he had 3 other associates which he was doing the killing. But just like Calin said, Yasnov was the main killer. So during the end, near 1939, Stalin ordered Yasnov to kill his other officers. So pretty much killing his friends, which he did in the end, because, like I said, these were yes men, just like Calin said. These were men that wouldn't oppose Stalin's word, or at least he thought. So he took out pretty much one of them, one by one. But actually, no, it was even a funnier story, because what he did is he ordered one of them to kill the other, then another one to kill the other, and then he would kill the last one. And sadly, what happened in, I think it was June or August of 1939, or even maybe September, around those 3 months, around that time period, just like I said, Stalin didn't want to leave any sort of traces, and he didn't even want to take any sort of risk, even though how fanatical towards communism Yasnov seemed. So he killed Yasnov himself, leaving no trace about the Great Purge.
And after years of obviously came Beria, who ended up outliving Stalin as part of the leadership of the NKVD. We can move on to the Stalin's death with the NKVD, unless you want to talk about the NKVD in World War II.
Yeah, we can talk about the NKVD in World War II for a bit. Like I mentioned before, just like as well as Calin mentioned, a lot of the high generals that would have played an important role in the first part of World War II, at least for the Eastern Front, have been either killed or just left in gulags to rot away. So the NKVD made sure that a lot of the people who were enrolled in the army weren't spies. A lot of the people who were enrolled in the army wouldn't actually go on to the other side or go join other nationalities, especially Romania, because in the first part of the Second World War, Romania was allied with the Germans, and at the time, especially during Operation Barbarossa in 1940 and 1944, it seemed that they weren't really doing much. They were actually losing, and when you see losing such a big country, losing half of the country, you would kind of want to go and join the opposite side, even though it was it was seen as the biggest crime to betray the motherland. Mm-hmm. Apart from that, they didn't really play a very impactful role. Like I said, even in the Second World War, they done most of the killing that Stalin needed to be done. Some of the officers on the Eastern Front, if they seemed that they couldn't literally hold the line, and they would actually retreat, because every time it was a last stand, it would be last stand, because Stalin said every order, we can't give you any reinforcements, we can't give you anything extra. You hold the line and you die for the motherland. You hold the line with your life. And if any man that was to retreat, even if in the defense of the Soviet Union or in the attacking part, in the second part of the World War II, when they went onto the Western Front into Germany, any man that would retreat would just get shot by high officers.
I've got some notes on that. So after, most notably in the defense of Moscow, Stalin declared that there would be no one step back, which meant that officers of each platoon would stand behind their soldiers and tell them to go forward. And if anyone tried to retreat, the officer would shoot them. So this was obviously taken to the extreme during the defense of Moscow, because this was seen as such a big symbol of the Soviet Union.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was let me see. It was Order 227.
Yeah, so it basically forced the soldiers to decide, do I die from my officer's handgun or from the enemy? And many soldiers chose to die by the enemy, obviously, to die a death where they protect their country.
This was especially seen in the siege of Stalingrad, where the fighting was ongoing for almost a month, and that was the turning point pretty much for the Soviet Union, and that's why they pretty much used all of the soldiers as cannon meats, because they didn't even have enough guns. It was to the point where one man was getting the gun and the soldier behind him was getting just a handful of bullets, and he would wait for the guy in front to die so he can take his gun and fight.
I've got another note about, so obviously during the Great Purge, the KGB also arrested a lot of scientists who were deemed
NKVD.
Yeah, the NKVD. Did I say KGB?
Yeah, you did say KGB.
Yeah, so sorry. The NKVD arrested a lot of scientists that were deemed to be using bourgeois techniques to reach their conclusions, or for other, obviously, like, not amazing reasons. These weren't rational reasons. They were just arresting them because they deemed them to be a threat to Stalin's power. During the latter stages of the Great Patriotic War, which is the name that the Soviet Union gave to the World War II, many scientists were actually taken out of the gulags to help Stalin in the development of weaponry. So most notably, the head of the aircraft research and development for the USSR was initially, at the start of the Second World War, a gulag prisoner. And he was taken out of the gulag to help the USSR develop a better plane, because at the beginning of the war, the USSR had quite bad planes. And obviously, as the war went on, and with his help, the Red Army managed to develop a much more sizable and efficient air force. And some generals who were sent to the gulags were also taken out from the gulags at the latter stages of World War II and put in a leading position. And some of them were sent back at the end of World War II because many people still deemed them as possible traitors to the Soviet Union if they were left in the positions that they held during the war. Oscar is here. Hello. He likes the new UI. Yeah. We decided to get the chats for YouTube and Facebook and combine them into.
I need to work a bit more on the whole stream.
Yeah.
Like I said before, any suggestions that you guys have, please do send an email or just tell us here. We'll try to improve over time.
Do you want me to talk about post-World War II now?
Yeah. I guess we can go and talk about post-World War II, and then we'll talk about Stalin's influence onto the KGB.
Okay, I'll change the topic. Post-World War II. NKVD. So, so the after World War II, Stalin was still concerned with his power because obviously after such a big conflict, he had to use a lot of resources. The country was weak, and it was ripe for someone to come in and swoop Stalin off his throne. Considering he was basically the king of the country. So Stalin purged a lot of people again. So most notably in 1949, because he was accused of not being impartial, he was Georgian. I got to mention this before I talk about it. So due to his Georgian roots, Stalin was accused of being preferential towards the Georgian people, and specifically the Georgian government, because Georgia was under a puppet government at the time. So in 1949, he purged the entire Georgian government as kind of a show to the people, to say that I will be the most brutal towards my people. I have no biases. I think of everyone in the Soviet Union as equally dangerous towards my reign. So that also weakened Beria, who himself was also Georgian and was a big candidate for the position of leader after Stalin's death. And once again, this happened in 1951 in an event known as the Doctor's Plot, where Stalin was getting old and he was getting very paranoid. And he told the NKVD to purge all of the experienced doctors in Moscow, as he thought that if he ever got ill, these people, due to being a bit older and knowing the life before Stalin, knowing the life under Lenin and knowing the life under the Tsar, they might purposefully kill him by failing a operation or doing something along those lines. And this was a key point when it came to Stalin turning ill in 1953. Stalin's condition deteriorated massively in 1953, and there was no one there for him to ask for help, as he killed all of the good doctors in Moscow, and there was no one really left in the whole of the USSR, because all of the best doctors obviously concentrated around Moscow, which meant that there was no one there to either tell Stalin what was going wrong with him, or tell him what he can do. Death of Stalin was so this was seen in the Death of Stalin, where there was in the Death of Stalin there is a doctor coming out of the hospital, and he just gets picked up in a van that's going past him, and is taken to Stalin to check what's wrong with him. And it's obvious that this doctor is basically like 1 or 2 years away from retirement, and he that sounds like my dad in immigration. The only doctors left in Moscow were either unexperienced doctors or doctors that were really old and couldn't muster anything like the one seen in the Death of Stalin. And as such, Stalin's condition continued to get worse and worse, and it led to his death, and then a big power struggle between Beria, who was the leader of the NKVD at the time, and Khrushchev, who was the mayor of Leningrad, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure, but he was obviously he was part of the cabinet, the cabinet that included Molotov, Stalin, and other of Stalin's friends, of his yes men, which Molotov was one of them. This is all seen in the movie Death of Stalin. I would really recommend it if you want to look into the topic of how Stalin ended up dying at an age where, although he was getting old, his health could have definitely been salvaged if he didn't promote the doctor's plot in 1951, where he wiped out all of the decent doctors in Moscow.
But I think we should go back a bit, just not trying to Stalin's death, and talk about the sort of influence that he had towards the KGB, towards the formation of the KGB. It's not necessarily that he directly had an influence, but obviously everything he left behind after his death, the regime that he had created, the type of communism that he installed, because the KGB is seen as pretty much the worst secret police in the world, even though we can argue about that, and we will do it some other time with different countries and nationalities. They push towards being very brutal. They push towards being very authoritative, and that's the sort of thing that Stalin always went towards, being authoritative and being the first, being always the father, being always the one that is always in charge, and knowing that people should fear him, so that he is not feared by others. So that others won't go against him. I'm going a bit of a mumble here. Like I said, pretty much the KGB had played a big role in the Cold War, but we're not going to go too much about that. We just want to say how it was born, and the sort of if you were to say regime that it kind of had on the Soviet Union after Stalin's death. And I think who came to power? Khrushchev, yeah, that came to power, and he also he didn't really much agree with the way Stalin ruled the country, but he did see a need for the secret police, because you needed to have some order if other people, especially during the start of the Cold War, where you had capitalism going against communism, and he didn't want any spies, again I said, and he didn't want any other people, communists, or at least we can say to be communist, you have an influence on the civilians, saying that, hey, look, here's capitalism, this is better than communism, why don't you join this sort of thing.
We could talk.
Okay, go on.
I mean, we could talk about the transformation of the NKVD to the KGB, if we're in the topic of Khrushchev, because I'm going to just change the NKVD to KGB, because after the death of Stalin, obviously, as Andrei said, Khrushchev didn't really agree in the way that Stalin ruled the country. And in 1956, after Khrushchev consolidated his power and removed his one competitor, which was Beria, he spoke about Stalin, what Stalin did during his reign in the 1956 secret speech, where he gathered all of the notable members of the Communist Party and basically denounced Stalin and his use of the secret police and the way he dealt with political opponents. I'll just read the chat real quick because we've got a few comments. Can we do a reaction on Lenin versus Stalin epic rap battles of history? Maybe in the future.
Is that still a thing?
Yeah. Can we please have Lenin versus Stalin? The secret speech. Yeah. So in the secret speech, he basically said Stalin. All of us know that what Stalin did is bad. We just couldn't really speak about it because we knew that would get removed. So from now on, I'm going to reverse everything bad that Stalin did. So although this was Beria's idea in the first place, Khrushchev kind of took credit for it and just dismantled the Gulag system. Mao did the same thing a few years along. The secret speech was a kind of a turning point for the Sino-Soviet relations because Mao was still kind of a fan of Stalin and he didn't really agree in the way Khrushchev was taking the country. But we can talk about the Sino-Soviet relations another time. So after the secret speech, I think it was in 1954, I think you've got it noted down, the NKVD, after the removal of Beria, was changed into the KGB, which is the what we know the best as the secret police in the USSR. And although Khrushchev promised that under his rule of the Soviet Union there would be more freedoms of expression, you could be more critical towards the Soviet government without having the fear of being put in a gulag, this didn't really come to fruition. So rather than the secret police, the old NKVD, doing what they did before, the KGB did something similar. So the KGB would listen in, see that you're being anti-communist, and take you away. But obviously there weren't any gulags left to put you in. So the way that they dealt with people that were deemed to be enemies of the state, they were taken to a hospital and deemed insane for not believing in the communist dream, and then put in a psychiatric ward. And that's where they would be held until they were deemed to be reformed into people who were normal with society and agreed with the communist system. There's some bits in chat that we need to read. Mao did the same thing a few years along. Look at him being clever. I can't gulag the USSR big man. Isn't the Cold War Soviet prisons seen pretty much as gulags? Yeah, like I said, although the gulags were dismantled, there were kind of stopgaps created, like the mental institutions or just prisons in general.
Yeah, but also we should mention that, because at the end of the day, gulags are more yes, they are seen as people being just brutally murdered inside them, but they were mainly seen as extreme labor camps or forced labor camps. So that pretty much, I guess that could be right, because a lot of the Soviet Union, especially in the Cold War, did use many of the prisoners from from the actual prisons to agriculture or simply to forced labor in mines or those sorts of things.
Although that did happen, yeah, it wasn't to the extent of the use under Stalin. So under Stalin, the Gulag prisoners were used to. A big example is the White Sea Canal, which is a canal that stretches from the top of the Soviet Union, the White Sea, all the way down to Leningrad. And this canal was mainly built for Gulag prisoners, and although it was more of a show project to show, like, this is what the Soviet Union can do, this is how great we are, it was very fatal for the people building it. It ended up in around 60% fatalities, if I remember correctly, of the people working there, because they were working through the winter, they weren't being fed properly, they weren't being clothed properly, because they were just deemed as a workforce. They weren't deemed as real people. They were just deemed as a way to get something done that Stalin wanted. this is what Soviet Union can do when people's barrels to the head. Yeah, so obviously the forced labor is not the ideal way to get people to work, but this was the way that it worked. From
Stalin.
from like during Stalin's time mostly. After it was mostly coercion and just being scared that you will be locked up in a mental institution for the rest of your life. We can move on to like some nice facts about the KGB, if you want to talk about Putin.
Well, yeah, it was. I think it was in 1974 that Putin was. I don't think he was head.
Well, he wasn't head.
He was an important.
He worked as a spy in East Germany. He was a translator. His official position was a translator, but that was a cover-up for his him staying in East Germany and spying on the government there. I don't know 100% the ideas of his career, but you'll ever heard Putin speak English. I mean, he gets English lessons on like a daily basis from what I've heard, and he speaks German fluent because of his time in East Germany as part of the KGB, and he speaks Russian, obviously. So yeah. So
imagine having. It's. I think it's only in Romania where they don't have a president where he fluently speaks the native language, or at least the language that is native for the country that he is presidency for.
So that's one of the big parts, and also the KGB did play a big part in all of the big events during the Cold War after Stalin's death. So we're talking about the Vietnam War, we're talking about the Afghanistan War. There was a lot of a branch of the KGB is the what is the name of the special forces? I always forget.
Spetsnaz.
The Spetsnaz, that's it. There are Spetsnaz units which were created specifically for operations to do with the KGB. So, as an example, during the war in Afghanistan, there was Spetsnaz or elite Spetsnaz units controlled by the KGB who were sent over to the capital to eliminate the oppositional president, which obviously we know how the war in Afghanistan went for the Soviet Union, but it shows that the KGB played a big part, like the CIA for America. They played quite a big part within the Cold War, and obviously, go on.
They do say that the Cold War, it was just pretty much a war of information, a war that was pretty much indirect. But just like you said, the KGB, just like the CIA, played a big scene behind the curtains. They were always doing something. People who think that there were no killings or no big events during the Cold War, that's not true. Yeah. Just because those killings didn't happen mainly in the Western world, that doesn't mean they didn't happen. Because a lot of the fighting, just like you said, you have the CIA who, they do say kind of started or at least continued what the Soviets have left in Afghanistan and saw potential for economic growth from war.
Yeah.
But then again, we're getting too political again.
I think that kind of wraps up. Obviously, the KGB went up until the collapse of the Soviet Union and continues to be the Russian secret police information agency.
I think it's just like Oscar said, the KGB and most of the secret police that we spoke about, at least on the Soviet side, they played more of a boogeyman. Yeah. Someone to actually put fear, but knowing, you're kind of skeptical, do they exist, do they not? And then one day you say they're not, and you do something bad, they knock on your door and pay you a visit.
I mean, we can end the stream there. We've covered secret police across the USSR.
Any other questions from the people?
Anyone on either Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, if you have any more questions. If not, we will move on to the outro and leave it there. I think we've covered all of throughout the whole history of the USSR and its secret police. Anything on Facebook?
I'm informed, Oscar says. Nothing on Facebook. We know that we left quite a bit with the KGB, but we wanted to specifically leave it between Stalin's life, because we think that especially the NKVD played the biggest role as a secret police, where the KGB did do a lot of secret operations that are still classified to this day. So there isn't a lot of information. There is a lot of speculation, of course, but there isn't a lot of justified information about the KGB and the actual importance that they played. But we can say they did play an important role during the Cold War.
Yeah. So I think with that, we're gonna leave it there. Thank you everyone for joining us. Our next podcast is probably going to be this Sunday. If you'd like to tune in, we are still thinking about a topic. So if you'd like to suggest something, leave a comment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, wherever you can, or you can email us.
An email.
Yeah, historyofyesterday@gmail.com. We always respond to most of the emails that we get sent. So if you want to talk about something. If you want us to talk about something, make sure to email us.
Sunday at the same time. Was it 6 p.m. GMT?
6 p.m. GMT, so 7 p.m. BST for everyone in Britain, and for everyone else, we don't know what time you are in. So if you can just look up the British time, you'll be able to catch us at that time. So I'm going to play the outro scene, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for watching.
Everything muted? Yes, okay. But știau mai mulți